Works. Active Pipe is today we're going to have a great conversation around what it is that we're doing and what we can do to really build great relationships as phenomenal estate agents. So let's get into the session and really make sure that we make the best use of that. And it really is about that whole conversation about learning about what we can do to really empower ourselves to absolutely play at our absolute best in the way that we go to do this as great estate agents. Now, what we do know is that without a doubt, it's a really important time for us to be thinking, very differently about how we actually go to perform. And that now more than ever before, it's about this conversation around the power of relationships in what we got to call this phenomenal digital world. And what I say to people is that, it's a really interesting thing is that this power of relationship is thinking that relationships actually exist in real and digital worlds. And now people are starting to think very differently about what do we have in terms of our online and both our offline experiences is actually just one experience that we actually have across the entire organization. And really, it's about really thinking what actually drives a great relationship. Well, to me, without a doubt, one of the things that really drives a great relationship is making sure that we've got relevance. Because if we're relevant to consumers, both buyers, sellers, tenants, landlords, that obviously drives what we got to call the frequency of the communication. So, could I actually speak to you 15 times during a day? Well, absolutely I could, if I'm actually in a position that I'm actually helping you to put a transaction together. And so our skill is to think that relevancy really drives the frequency of that communication. And then we just need to be consistent in our actions. Now, consistency in marketing and our marketing efforts is ultimately what makes you great. I used to come from a media background, particularly back in the old school newspaper days, and we had to get that newspaper out on a daily basis. And the discipline that taught us about making sure that the front headline was amazing, that we had great body copy, that we had really good quality marketing content, that made a huge difference in what actually happened in terms of the sales of that newspaper. And there's no difference in what we actually do in terms of our digital communications when we're actually being out there and being great estate agents. Now, if you think a bit about that, the power of media and publishing consistently changes everything. Because if we make sure, for example, that we have the same email go out every Friday, we actually start to build rapport, relationship, and trust with our end consumers. And our job is to make sure that literally we're really playing at our absolute best and to learn that repetition is the thing that really does go to build that brand loyalty. And we start to think about it, some of you have probably seen all the things that happen with Black Friday and then Cyber Monday, and then off the back of that Cyber Week this week. We've been seeing a ton of emails and SMSs and a different range of communications that are happening inside of the retail environment. And what we've got to learn to do is to build trust and rapport and relationship, because some of those things were certainly unwarranted and unwanted. And some of those communications, we actually pressed buy now and we went and bought products and services, right? So our lesson as great estate agents is to really think about the power of what we're doing in building a great brand and how we actually use Active Pipe, which is powered by MultiWorks, to really make sure that we've got that consistency. Now, consistency builds excellence in what we go to call brand execution. And we now live in a world where people actually expect us to be really consistent around the actions that we actually undertake. And to me, that lesson is an important one, because what we're actually starting to think about is that how we actually go to segment that data and provide more powerful marketing to exactly the right audiences as it actually happens. Now, if we think about segmentation, there's a couple of really key audiences that we need to play with in being great estate agents. And the first one, without a doubt, is the audience of what we got to call our landlords, investors, and previous landlords. Now, what you want to start to think about is that we're starting to emerge into this conversation that literally there are very specific audiences that should receive very specific marketing communications from us. The first one, without a doubt, is to have a quick look and say, okay, well, inside of a business, you might think, okay, great, we've got a sales environment, and then we've got a property management environment. But actually, they're two very different data sets. And if you think about it, what actually happens inside of a property management business is that ultimately when a landlord moves their property, sells their property, takes that property and maybe moves back into it or potentially moves it to a rival estate agency, just because we lose the listing, it doesn't mean that we should actually lose the relationship. So one of the things that we've actually just seen in one of the most aggressive growth cycles in a market is that as the market started to improve over the course of the pandemic, we actually saw a lot of landlords actually go and sell their investment properties. And the reason for that is that ultimately landlords make money in two ways. They make money from rent that they receive on a property, and they also make money from a capital gain that actually happens when they go to sell a particular property. Now, interesting enough, what we actually are seeing now is that as we move into a declining market across the major sections of Australia and New Zealand, what's very, very clear is that property prices are coming down, or as I like to say it, housing affordability is improving. And the secondary thing that's actually happening is that rent is certainly increasing in a number of marketplaces. Now, when all of a sudden property prices come down and rent increases, what we've actually then got to start to think about is that, okay, well, this is a really different environment, because now landlords should be back in and actually buying investment properties because they're actually seeing that they're getting a better quality return as those property prices come down and rents actually improve. So if you thought about maybe sending a specific investor-led email, maybe once every week or once every fortnight through your active pipe where you've got a really specific audience that you actually serve them properties that they should be buying that foundationally present a really good return, a great opportunity for future development on that particular site, or maybe already has an existing lease in play with an existing tenant. And this is about thinking about, okay, well, hang on a second. I know that we've got all of these listings that are currently available, but how do we actually make sure that we serve the right properties to exactly the right consumers? The second one is to then think about all of the market front. There are so many real estate agents that go out there, go and do an incredible market appraisal on a property. But what you've now got to realize is that every single market appraisal that you've now done is actually incorrect, because ultimately property prices have changed. Now, if you think about it, one of the things I often do is I say, hey, go file print and print off every market appraisal that you've ever done inside of your career. But what you want to do is you want to think about very specific segmentation. So could you actually go and sign people up to receive very specific buyer and seller alerts, because you know that ultimately they're looking to buy a particular thing, maybe they own a property of a similar type, and ultimately you're going to send them a specific email that might go out on every Monday or Tuesday, which actually gives them a list of all the properties that have been listed and a list of all the properties that have been sold inside of their market over the course of the last 7 days. Now think about this as being like a modern day CMA report rather than the quarterly or the annual report. We're actually sending out a weekly report of all the new listings and all the sales that have been made by any agency in your area, from the major real estate websites. And this is an important email to start to think differently about. The next one after that is to then think about ultimately all of those buyers, sellers that sit inside of that marketplace. Some of these may well be your market appraisals, but are you thinking about the specific content that you can send to buyer sellers about why now is actually the reason that they should be buying and selling? Because ultimately prices have come back down. This market really benefits those people that are ultimately buying up. And that's a really important conversation to say, hey, if you're a buyer seller right now, then this is actually something you should be doing. But it's actually about then putting powerful video content into your email. So then off the back of that, they can actually see a great conversation. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I got to tell you, so one of the key things that we notice is it's very, very difficult to actually be in a position to go and sell your home and then be homeless. And the last thing you want to do is go and buy a home and commit at a certain level without having sold yours, because if yours sells for less, then naturally you're actually going to be in a position that there's going to be a shortfall in those funds. What we're doing to help a number of our clients out is we're actually offering the opportunity for us to be in a position that we go and we get you ready. We get the photos taken, we get the marketing ready, we get everything done as though we're going to go live to market. And then we go and find you what you want. And actually, when you find you what you want, you let me know and we press the button. And in under a couple of minutes or an hour or so, we've got your property featured on the major real estate websites. We've got it inside of our emails. We're in a position that we've got it on the website. And then what we ultimately do is we try to get as many of those buyers, through your property as possible to get a great offer on yours. So then you can go and proceed with a great offer on the one that you want to go and buy. And that skill of what great agents do is making sure that the marketing that you actually produce is really driven towards those very specific segments. And that then leads you into that conversation of then going and saying, okay, great, what do we got to do with past clients? And this is really about that power of automation, where we actually start to say, okay, great, anyone who's actually bought a property from us during the month of December, as an example, then they actually, build that particular target audience and send them an email at the start of December that says, hey, congratulations, you've now owned your home for another year. You're actually due for an annual checkup. Simply click on the link below, and that takes us off to some of that incredible calendar software that's out there that allows people to book in an appointment, or even just to a web form that allows them to actually request an appointment for you to pop out and to provide an annual checkup on their home. And this is about you just thinking, wow, Josh, we used to just think about one email, we send that to everyone and we spray and pray across the entire data set, as opposed to actually saying, there is really powerful segmentation now. What is our landlords, investors, or previous landlords email that we send out? What sort of content do we send out to our market appraisals? What sort of things do we send out to our buyers, sellers about what's new to market, what's been sold in our weekly CMA style report? And then what are we doing to drive the automation for the annual checkups through the emails that we may go to send, once a month to those specific group of people that have actually owned the home every year for a year. This is an important conversation because what it gets you to start to think about is it's the right messaging to the right people at exactly the right time. Now, if you think about us as a real estate training company, one of the things that we've worked out is that we've got salespeople that we work with. We also work with property managers. And also in addition to that, we also work with business owners. Now, if I was in a position that I was going to say, okay, great, changes to the Residential Tenancies Act, And if I send that to salespeople, it's probably not that relevant, but it's definitely relevant for property managers. And if I send, for example, how to scale your business to sell it, that's probably not that relevant to salespeople, but it's really relevant to business owners. So this is where you start to think, well, Josh, that makes sense. What we've got to do is we've got to start to segment the database in a very different way, and then use ActivePipe to actually make sure that we're sending very specific templates. And the power of the email builder, the power of actually getting that segmentation to pull that data out of our CM, out of our customer relationship management software, out of that CRM, makes a huge difference in our overall success. Now, why is this so critically important? Is that you remember that you need an email address to actually go and open a social media account. It's connected to your internet browser. So everything you do actually links back to what actually happens inside of your email address. And it's the essence of building great relationships with customers. So isn't it amazing? You go into a retail store now and people are like, oh, by the way, can I have your email address so I can just send you a copy of the receipt? And the reason why they're doing it is that they want to retarget you. They want to go and send you emails. They want to go and send you that, hey, happy birthday, or that conversation around saying, hang on a second, you know what, we should send you something around this Cyber Monday type stuff that we've seen over the course of the last 48 or 72 hours. Why this is so important is that you got to start to think about the power of email marketing. It's at the core of what we do in running a real estate training business. And I know that I could turn social off yesterday, but there's no way that I could turn off email, because it's absolutely at the core of building deep relationships with customers. So how do you move to now taking that conversation, saying, we've got beautiful segmentation, but what are we actually doing to go and drive the intent with great buyer work in this new world? So we now know that interest rates are designed to kill demand. And it's certainly doing that, right? Like across the country, rather than having 10 or 15 people turn up at an open, now we're getting 2 or 3. And if we get 2 or 3, we're pretty excited about that. But we're starting to think differently about how consumers actually really go to work. So what we do is we specifically go and have a look at about data, and we say, what actually happens next? And what we know is that everything that we do lands back on the website, right? So this is interesting, whether or not it's a printed material where people scan a QR code, or they're in a position they're on the front of a signboard and they scan a QR code, or they get an email from us and we ultimately click on that link and we land back on the website. That click trail is actually really easy to map in terms of the heat sensor. So normally when someone looks at a property, the first key thing is that they enlarge the photos and they click through the photo library. Then they then go and have a quick look at the floor plan. And then depending on your state or territory or country, they might end up having a look at some extra documents that might be available. So for example, we have a thing called a statement of information in Victoria, which is a legal requirement on property listings, where ultimately people then go and have a quick look at that because it actually gives a price guide. Then it might move into things like booking an inspection, which we did a lot of during the course of the pandemic, or add them to our open for inspection planner, or potentially even send an inquiry. So that open for inspection planner is the ability to be able to add that to their calendar, so they know that literally they've got to go to that particular open for inspection. And then ultimately they go to physically turn up. So our job is to actually track that if we're, for example, seeing lots of people getting photos, having a look at that floor plan, but not moving into those extra docs, then that ultimately might be a challenge. And then we're then moving into downloading, for example, pest and building reports, where they're moving up to go and buy a copy of those directly from our websites. And again, that should be a trackable link that literally sits inside of the email to then allow people to then move into downloading copies of contracts, legal documentations, or potentially even making offers. And when you start to think about that, about understanding digital intent, how easy is it for a consumer to go and do those things, from the emails that you send out, from the marketing that actually happens inside of your business, to actually make sure that then you can track what's happening in the digital world to transact that into real world relationships. And that's where we're trying to get you to look for really specific actions that actually clearly lead to real world intent. And that's about that whole conversation. You're right, someone could walk through an open for inspection on a Saturday, say, you know what, this one's not for me. And then they get a great email or follow-up directly after that. And before you know it, we find them back on the website, clicking to download a copy of the pest and building reports and turning up in a week or 2 weeks' time and actually bidding at auction. And this is kind of interesting that, buyers agents kind of tell agents out there to say, to buyers to say, hey, hold back from telling the agent everything about your level of intent, because we want to kind of play it out over this new phase in this new environment. Now, we obviously don't recommend that. We say to buyers, hey, let us know everything about where you're at, because property transactions move quickly and we want to make sure that we keep you fully informed. Now, why that's kind of an interesting conversation is it gets us to then start to think that in order for success to happen in any business, the first thing that you need to do is to actually go and have a strategic review. So as a part of today's webinar, one of the things that I'm doing with my best clients around the world, as I say, the first thing that you want to do is to review every listing that you actually won this year. And actually just ask yourself this very simple question: how do we actually meet the seller? Now, why that's critically important is that you might say, look, out of the 100% of people that I met this year, Josh, I'm actually in a position that 50% of those people were actually buyers. And then I'm in a position that 25% from my Justice Adjust Sold campaigns. And to be honest, Josh, there's probably 25% of the listings where I just got them because I got lucky. I'm like, okay, well, great. Well, here's a huge problem, because when we have a look here over at the list, maybe we're not getting anyone from the past clients, and we should be. Maybe we're not getting anything from our previous market appraisals. Maybe we're not getting anything from our landlords or investors, or maybe we're not getting anything from our social proof campaigns, or in addition to that, maybe we're not getting anything from like our 10-10-20s, or certainly in addition to that, the sort of stuff that we would do in terms of the community work. Now, the challenge with that is that when we go to have a quick look at those level of momentum, that our job is to actually really make sure that strategically we're getting really clearly to the work that actually works, and we amplify those activities. And if we're not doing that, then we really should be looking at the segmentation of what actually is that we're doing inside of our database and the specific emails that we actually go to send out. And that's a really important part about actually really planning your marketing to make sure that you actually get results in the areas that you need to. The next thing is then go and have a quick look at what we go to call average fee. And average fee is a really important conversation, because let's think about the psychology of sales, right? So if you're in a position that you save 2% and it's round, well, what's the next number after that? Well, my mind thinks 1.5, because I start thinking in halves, right? But what you got to start to think, well, hang on a second, what would actually happen if I change the way that I go to present information? And this is the power of incredible visuals. So let's say, for example, that you have a basic fee at 2.13%. And then we also have a basic plus fee, which is at 1.91% plus 5 cents for every dollar above the reserve. Now, what actually happens here is that, hang on a second, there are some really important psychological things that we're actually showing, because what we are demonstrating very clearly is that ultimately there's a choice. Now, let's have a quick look at the breakdown in the sales psychology. Basic versus basic plus. I'll have the basic plus, thanks. 2.13 versus 1.91. Well, geez, it's kind of hard to decipher. I'll just go with the basic plus because it's the most popular. And so this is about getting really clear that literally pricing of your services, in other words, the fees that you charge, is actually a very specific, strategic, and deliberate decision. And what we actually do here is we say, okay, great, let's think about, do we actually present our fees in a print way? So then when we're in front of clients, they can actually say, you know what, that actually makes a huge difference. Now, why that's important is it then leads to what we actually go to call average sale price. An average sale price is also a very specific decision, because you've got to understand how your market's actually working. Now, what we actually did see over the course of the previous 2 years was an increase in average sale prices by 10, 20 to even 30 up to 40%. And in places like Byron Bay here in Australia, up by 81% over the course of that pandemic period. Now, what you got to realize is that if your core or average sale price is actually like $1 million, for example, then maybe they need to sell a property for 500,000 to then go and buy the one for $1 million. So naturally, what we know is that ultimately the before market is 500,000, which then leads us into our core market of $1 million. So when you're standing at $1 million open home, expect to find sellers with $500,000 properties to sell. Now, the interesting conversation is that when the seller sells the $1 million property, where do they move to next? And maybe, for example, they buy up and they move to the neighboring suburb, but they go and buy the bigger or the better home for 1.5 million. Now, naturally, where all of those sellers move to, that's your aftermarket, but they might have bought through a competitor and you don't even realize, well, hang on a second, they should actually be someone now that we should be in a position that we should be thinking that that's now the next market for us to move into. So think about before, core, and aftermarkets, and they're really important things for you to go and transition into. Now, why that's kind of critical is it then moves you into what we got to call the volume of transactions. Now, if you ever think about it, the most transaction volumes actually went up by like 30% over the course of the most recent boom. But now we're going to see that come back. But it's strategic that you can go from 20 to 22 deals, but to actually go from 100 to 140 transactions per annum, that's a very different game. So here is the conversation. What is the total size of the pie? And do we actually need to chase more markets, or do we just need to increase our market share inside of the existing markets that we already work in? And this is a really important conversation in your strategic review to think about average sale price, the fee, and the volume of transactions, and what we're actually doing with those to actually go to produce a very specific result. Now, why that's the driver is that then gets you to then think about, well, what are the strengths right now that I should actually be leveraging? So when you think about the strengths that you should be leveraging, you might be saying, you know what, Josh, I'm in a position that this year I found that my listing presentation was really good when it actually came to me explaining what we do in the digital world of marketing for property. But you know what, I actually need to start to think about my strengths to go to develop. And to be honest, Josh, I didn't really get consistent market appraisals each and every week. I really didn't get my 45-minute call sessions in when I should have. I'm in a bit of a position right now that I could have done a little bit more. And so what we're actually doing here is we're saying, okay, well, what are the strengths to leverage and what are the strengths to go to develop, and get very clear about where the biggest opportunity for growth actually sits inside of your business. You might be shocked to see that there's so little listings actually coming from past clients, when in fact that should be a really dominant lead source. Or maybe, for example, you're not getting anything out of your just listed and just sold, and so it's time to go and revisit the marketing template, change the subject line, change the body copy, change the call to action in terms of the buttons that you can click and what that actually does. So we move from request appraisal to find out how much your house is worth. And literally that one little change actually triggers the change in people clicking on that button, landing on the web form, and then naturally moving into a position to then call you out for your particular services. And that's really awesome, because if you think about it, what we're doing at a marketing level is it really is a battle of perception. And we're actually starting to think that we've got to upgrade the quality of the marketing of what we do, and in particular the execution, to the very specific audiences that we wish to go to serve. So ultimately, this is about a conversation that when we're using our tools like ActivePipe, is that where do we actually position ourselves? Do we see ourselves as being the Louis Vuitton of our marketplace? Or do we actually see ourselves as being the reject shop? Or do we find ourselves in the middle, that we're a really good quality David Jones that actually can work with consumers at all different levels and price points? And this is about making sure that we've got to start to think about the language that we use and how that is conveyed in what it is that we do in terms of our marketing energy and efforts. Now, ultimately, we need to be where the customer is. And the research is really clear, and you'll find it inside of the screen time on your own phone. But we, on average, are spending about 7 hours per day on our mobile devices. We are in a digital world, and email is at the center or core of that world in terms of the way that we go to work with people. Now, why this is such an incredibly important part is that we need to be able to produce incredible digital content to land into the hands of the consumers that's exactly right for them and their situation. So I'll give you an idea. I'm a landlord. I've been a landlord for the last 22 years or so, and I've never, ever received investment properties that I could buy from that particular agency that looks after my particular properties. So I'm a landlord that is completely underserved. They've never asked me. They never ever sent me any of those emails. But literally, that could make a huge difference in my purchasing decisions. And this is about our whole idea, is that make it easy for people, stop being a marketer, so to speak, and actually really learn how to be a great digital marketer, where you're thinking about the right messaging turning up at exactly the right times in the way that we go to work with those consumers. Now, why is that so important? Because everything print that we do pushes back to the listing. Everything digital that we do links to the listing. So when you think about print, we're thinking about the brochure of that particular property. We're thinking about the signboard that sits out the front. We're in a position that we're starting to think about, really simple little things that we do, like a little DL or a just listed that ends up in the mailbox that should ultimately have a little QR code on it that links directly to that particular property on the website. Everything digital that we do, whether or not it be on social or what we do in terms of our emails, is ultimately a link that takes you back to that particular property on the website. So we need to make sure that in order to be great marketers, that we actually make it great. So the video experience, the floor plan experience, the tours experience is a really important part of what we actually do. Now, as we start to get really clear, our lesson is that as we finish off this year, we need to have a phenomenal plan for what we're actually going to go and do in 2023. And that really is about making sure that you've got a clarity on a plan. Now, the best agents that I work with around the world are in a position that they're very, very clear that they may be, for example, launching properties on Boxing Day, with the view that there's a lot of website activity on Boxing Day, and again, also to on New Year's Day. Now, you got to get clear, like why would you list the property in January? Well, I'm like, well, there's no RBA meeting, which actually means there's no changes to interest rates. We're in a position that ultimately in January, we'll also see there's a lot of leftover buyers from December and November that didn't get to buy. We also know that literally there's a number of people that sell in November, December, and now need to buy in January. There's no negative media sentiment because there's no reporting on auctions until around about the 15th of February, in the middle of Feb. In addition to that, there's people go on holidays now, they actually take their mobile phones with them, which means they're only one swipe away from finding the house that they want. And in addition to that, we're actually in a position that literally there's a new year, a new energy. So as an agent, you've got to get really clear about positioning yourself for success. And that may well be about starting to think, okay, great, what we're going to do is that we're going to make a decision to launch on Boxing Day. We're going to have lots of great marketing, and we know that ultimately we're going to bank all of that inquiry for our first slot of private appointments, maybe on the 10th of January, and then our first slot of open for inspections on the 14th, the 21st, the 28th, with maybe even a twilight auction if you're an auction-based agency as early as Tuesday, January the 31st. Now, we've got a client who's aiming for 100 properties to be launched in their marketplace on Boxing Day, with a view to then be in a position that ultimately they sell them by January 31, to then be in a position that ultimately they do around $20,000 per transaction, over $2 million in fees generated in January. So this is a really important part about what it is that you're doing, is to get planning and actually have a strategic plan. So maybe there's a great email that you could be sending out to your database. Summer sells, why people are making the decision to sell in January rather than any other month next year in 2023. And that's that whole idea, is that ultimately it's about us really understanding the purpose of what great marketing is always about. Now, what I do is I pull people back to purpose rather than to execution. I say, well, hang on a second, what's the problem we're actually trying to solve? So when I have a look at very simple activities, for example, like Just Listed, I say, what is actually the purpose of Just Listed? Now, the purpose of Just Listed is to drive neighbors to the open for inspection. So how well are you doing that right now? Because when you start to think about it, it's not only those neighbors, but it's also those people within that 1.5 kilometer radius. And you can pull that search up inside your active pipe and make sure that you've got the automated Just Listeds going out. But please, go in and customize your Just Listed templates. You want to try to find sellers that are in the area. You want to drive the perception of competition to buyers. So making sure that those emails actually have a very quick add to calendar link. Build data for that Just Sold campaign, and then really start thinking about building high quality pipeline. And what our lesson is here is that what we've got to do is we've got to make sure that we execute Just Listed really well. Now, this is the basic idea. We're back now to the old school 10, 10, 20. 10 houses either side, 20 across the road. And naturally what we do when we get a listing is that then on a Thursday afternoon at 4 o'clock, we go and knock the door. And then we're in a position, we say, hey guys, I thought I'd just quickly let you know, we're in a position right now that we've just listed number 24. I'm the local real estate agent. I wanted to give you a personal invitation to go and inspect that particular property. By the way, would it be okay if I let you know when that particular property sells and what it makes? And in order for me to do that, what's the best mobile number for me just to SMS that result to? And now all of a sudden we get the mobile number, we've now got the first name, the surname, we get the email address, we put them inside of our system. And then we're in a position that we send them maybe a nice little DL that arrives in the letterbox on Friday, a nice little email reminder on Saturday morning combined with maybe an SMS. We're starting to learn the power of high quality marketing. Again, when the property has then been sold, we then move specifically into our Just Sold campaigns. And the purpose of what Just Sold is all about is to really build buyer confidence that properties are actually selling. So making sure that you've got the automation set up in the back of your active pipe to let everyone know within that 1.5 kilometer radius of the sale is a really important part, and then advise those sale prices to actually increase confidence between what the quote is and what's actually happening in relation to sale prices. Establish the value of their home, the ability to be able to go and book a market appraisal. Given this sale, what does that now mean your place is worth? If you'd like to find out, click on this button here. So again, reviewing the quality of the templates that are sitting inside of your active pipe execution. And then literally moving, and thinking about we're a forklift, and we put the forklift in underneath all of these buyers, we lift them up, we move them over to this particular property, and now we've got to put the forklift down. And that's a really important conversation, is that where we're moving to go to cross-sell them onto alternate listings. So every single time that we make a sale, where do we take these buyers? What other properties can we go to show them to actually get them into a position where they ultimately go to purchase? And that's really important, because it's about starting to change the way that we go to play the game. And things that I think about is that we want to try to get 3 buyers at every photo shoot. If we get buyers to photo shoots, it drives the perception of competition. We then want to be in a position we want to go and work the neighbours. Think about the quality of that 10, 10, 20 during the Just Listed campaign to make launch week a real launch, because it can't fall flat. Door knock, door hangers, SMS, email invites, then call them for when it sells to build confidence in everything that you do. You know, one of my favorite things to go and do now is what I go to call calendar invites for casual invitations to an open if they can't attend a private appointment. You know, this happens all the time, right? Friday, 5:15 p.m., you're driving home, you've had a big day, big week. All of a sudden, a buyer rings you and goes, oh, you know, can I go to that open? Yeah, it's open on Saturday, 10 o'clock. Okay, cool, mate, no problems. And they hang up. Well, shouldn't we automatically send them a calendar invite for the first 10 minutes of that open for inspection? So you think about your calendar, you've got the 5 buyers that said that they would turn up. That actually allows for a really good quality, tight follow-up, both before and post that open for inspection. After any change in relation to marketing, sale methodology, price, you must get a buyer through in the following 24 hours so that ultimately they link price reduction actually equals that buyer activity. And then it's really up to you as a great real estate agent to make sure that you really know what has actually been listed, what has actually been sold, and what's actually had a price reduction in the course of the last 24 hours, and who should really know about that. This is really where I love the automation that comes into this system, particularly about what has been listed, what has been sold in the course of the last 7 or so days in my local area. You know, one of my clients happens to use ActivePipe in his marketplace in Carlton, where I own an investment property. And every single time that he gets a new listing, every single time there's a significant sale, the system automatically let me knows about that it's come up because it's within a 1.5 kilometre radius of my subject property. Now, the skill of what great agents really do is that they start to think very differently about process. And when we're starting to think a little bit about process, we're starting to say, okay, great. Our job is to make sure that we are in a position that we actually work with really powerful segmentation. So let's say, for example, the best thing that you can do as an agent is to actually have a phenomenal seller hit list. And this review frequency is actually something you do on a day-by-day basis. So let's say that last night you went out to a great listing presentation and you didn't win the listing, but you're in a position that now today, you're actually starting to think about what you can do for great follow through. So what you actually do here is you say, okay, great. Maybe we could send them some chocolates. Maybe we could get a painter through. Maybe we could have a conversation to bring someone else through from the agency. Maybe we could be in a position that we could, you know what, get a buyer through. We could get a contract organized. We could get a contractor, like a painter or a plumber or someone to go down and help them in getting that property ready. That is really critical that you review that list on a daily basis. We then have what we've got to call our buyer seller list, people that we know that foundationally, if we find them something to buy that naturally they will sell, they should be on your ActivePipe email list where they get specifically all the properties that have been listed, all the properties that have been sold in your updated weekly CMA about what's actually come to market. And you want to review that frequency on a daily basis. So if you see a new listing or if you see a sale that's been made that they should be aware of, that you jump on the front foot and you have a great conversation with them about that. And that then leads us into what we've got to call our market appraisals. And this is a phenomenal ground where literally there is so much opportunity. What I get agents to do now is to print off a list of every market appraisal that they've ever done inside of their entire careers and say, guys, you know, what I actually want you to do is I want you to get on the phone and to ring every single one of those people. That's really what a great conversation is all about. It's about really making sure that we're getting back in front of those people. You know, hey, Hannah, it's Josh. I just thought I'd give you a quick call. I know that we popped out. We gave you an idea of the value of your place. How have things progressed? What are the next steps? How can I help? And Hannah, if I had a buyer, could I mention your place or should I sell them something else? And that's a really powerful way to get segmentation. But it's not just about building the database. It's actually what you do with the relationships that sit inside of that database that make a massive difference on your overall success. As we get ready for the close in today's webinar, and certainly guys, feel free to put any questions. I'm going to answer those as we finish up shortly. But I want you to think about what is the great work that you can really be doing over the course of this next 20 to 30 days. And the lesson is that for me, without a doubt, get on the phone and to ring every single market appraisal that you've ever done inside of your career. And this is a really important thing. Every appraisal that you've ever given up until this point is absolutely, completely wrong. So we've got to get back out. We've got to get in front of those people and go and have some great conversations with them around that. Call every single past client. And don't let other competitors steal your past clients. Be in a position that you want to get on the phone and offer them your forecast for 2023. You know, hey, Damien, it's Josh. I thought I'd just give you a really quick courtesy call. I thought I'd quickly check in. How's the year been for you? I know it's been really big. You know, how are things for you guys, house to house? And now I wanted just to offer you our 2023 forecast. What we're expecting is going to happen in 2023 is that January and February will be reasonably buoyant, but we expect that literally interest rates again will dampen the mood and the spirit by the time we get to March, April, and May. We'd be expecting that June and July will be a bit of a level out, and from August through until December, we actually expect it to be a very normal market. No growth, no decline, but a very stable market. But ultimately, what we do know is that if it's about maximizing sale price, we expect that January and February will most likely be where that will happen. We're also well and truly aware that we are seeing in some inner city markets, particularly in Sydney and Melbourne, which tend to lead the rest of the country, that ultimately they have wiped out all of the gains that actually happened during the course of the pandemic. We expect that that will happen here as well. Naturally, that's why you ultimately want to try and sell now while you can to maximize taking those gains off the table. And that's a really important reason about why we would actually be transacting in early January as opposed to a March, April, or May campaign. Then also too, in addition to that, let's go and firm up that buyer-seller list. This is a great time to go and use the survey tool that sits inside of ActivePipe to find the buyers that actually have digital intent, particularly on your buyer hit list, so that you can actually make sure that you get great results with them. And this is really, really important to know who are the people that foundationally need to buy and then ultimately need to sell. Now, this is a great one. What I do with these people, really basic, I just go and get on that conversation. I go and start thinking a little bit about what I'm doing with them and say, hey, Angus, it's Josh. I just thought I'd give you a quick courtesy call, but I know that you're interested in buying, but ultimately you've got a house to sell. And that's a really dangerous thing, right? Because you don't want to sell yours and then be homeless. And at the same time too, you don't want to buy and commit at a certain level and then not be able to complete because you didn't get the right sale price on your place. So what we're actually doing for a few people, and that might be good for you, is that naturally what we do is we get everything done on your property. We get the photos taken, we get the contracts organized, we get everything done as though you're going to go live to market, then we go and find you what you want to buy. When you find you what you want, you let me know, we press the button, and literally in under a minute, what we then do is we then get the property live on the major real estate websites, we send it out on our ActivePipe, and naturally we're then in a position that we get 7 or 8 buyers through your place, we get a great offer on yours, so then you can proceed with a great offer on the one that you actually ultimately want to go and buy. And this is really thinking through the difference about getting the exact right people at exactly the right time through yours, so you can proceed with confidence. And that's really what we're in. We're in the game of confidence in the way that we work with buyers, and certainly in the way that we go to work with sellers. It is also a really important thing is to go and list for 2023. And this is about thinking very differently about what it is that you're doing to make sure that you're in front of exactly the right people, and about setting that target and saying, you know what, Josh, I'm going to go for 5 listings for the start of next year. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We get one, great, 4 more to go. Get another, great, 3 more to go. Get another, 2 more to go. So then we're actually in that position that we're really striking gold. And that's a really nice way to kind of think about, you know, your number one job is what great agents do, is that they really make sure that they're getting in front of the exact customers at exactly that right point in time. So team, we've got a couple of minutes that I've left here. So we've got a bit of a chance here for any questions that you might want to ask. And certainly please put them into the question box as quickly as we can, because I want to make sure that we get the most use out of our time today. While we wait for a couple of those questions to come in, I just want you to think about this. It always comes back down to the intent of what you actually want to go to create. So I dare you to add you to your database and actually see what you get from you. And that's such a great thing to do, right? Put yourself in as an investor, put yourself in as the buyer, actually see what actually happens. You know, move into a position that you click on that button to update your details and actually go through the experience of what that looks like inside of ActivePipe, so you know the experiences of what consumers are about to go through. And the lesson is that literally when you become your own customer, it makes you think very, very differently about what it is that you do and how you actually go and have those conversations with people. And our job is to make sure that we're sitting in front of the right people at exactly that right point in time. And it's now literally this whole conversation is about thinking differently about how you actually go to perform. Great to see Emma Canalen today. Great question here. Any strategies around picking up expired or unsold properties at this time? Emma, that's a great conversation. What we do with people is this. The best thing for you to do is to actually go through and have a look at all of the properties that are on market longer than 90 days. You know, most agency agreements are about 90 days or so, depending upon your area. And the first thing that I would do is actually go after the people that you already know. Hey, Emma, it's Josh. I just thought I'd give you a quick courtesy call today. Usually what I find of a local real estate agent is that your property has been on the market for a day or two longer than what would normally be the case. Now, you might already be in an exclusive authority agreement, but if you were out of that, we'd certainly love to have a conversation around what it is that we do and whether or not we might be able to assist you into the future. And I just think, very differently, just have some great conversations with that, build up the relationships with people to make sure that then you can go to get that result over time. Now, the answer to this is that then if you are also chasing people that are in a position that maybe they're with an alternate agent, then literally just have that conversation. Hey, Mika, it's Josh. We haven't had the opportunity to meet as yet. I'm one of the local real estate agents in the area, and I like to track and see what's actually happening in relation to property. And I've noticed that your particular property has been on for a day or two longer than is normal in the local area. Where are you going? You have an exclusive authority period. If you do, we wouldn't be able to assist with that. But if you're out of that, we'd be thrilled to have a discussion and to show you the reasons why X, Y, Z number of clients have actually made the decision to use us during the course of that particular period. And it's really about thinking differently about what it is that you do to actually make sure that you can get back in front of the right people at exactly that right point in time. Now, I know that whether or not you're in residential, whether or not you're in commercial, your number one job is to actually find very specific data sets and to go and do specific things with those particular people. And what we actually do inside of our businesses is to really think about that there is great power, now in really making sure that we get in front of the right consumers at exactly that right point in time. So literally, I'm thinking about where we're at. It's a fantastic time to go and clean up that database. This is a great time to really get back on that marketing forefront, to update your templates, update the terminology, update the language, learn the power of being able to change the subject line, the body copy, some of the content that you're sending out, and to really think, the difference about what it is that you can do to become a phenomenal real estate agent by getting in front of the right people at exactly the right time with exactly the right marketing messages. So team, I really hope that that's helped you a lot today. We're going to get a copy of the slides out to our Active Pipe team, powered by MoxieWorks, to be in a position that they can get you those key slides from today. And please always remember, if you need anything at all, then certainly reach out to our team to actually help you and to support you at the Active Pipe group. They'll be able to make sure that they're very focused around helping you with some of those template updates and showing you where to go to make sure that you can really use the product in a really powerful way. And at a real estate training level, if we can ever help you, we'd be thrilled to do that. If we don't get a chance to actually see you before the end of the year, then certainly if you are traveling, please stay super safe. We hope that you have a phenomenal period with your family over the Christmas break, and we look forward to seeing you all out in 2023. Team, thanks so much for attending our session today. Thanks to the team from Active Pipe and MoxieWorks to actually make this happen today. We look forward to seeing you guys next time. Thanks so much, team. We'll see you soon. Cheers.